All right, well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I did not have time to say everything that I wanted to the other day, and so I'm grateful to have the chance to give a fuller report. I'm doing this as an attendee at the Hamburg Scientology Conference, and my name is Hannah Eltringham Whitfield. I was a Scientologist and a member of the SEED organization for over 22 years. It does not sound that long when you think of others who've been in for 25 years, but for me it was too long. I captained 2 of Hubbard's ships and ran many of his organizations. In 1967, he took on the title of Commodore, because by then he had a fleet of ships, and I served as Deputy Commodore under him in the United States for 2 years later on. I held many subsequent positions, including the head of the Authority and Verification Unit, which was the filter for all of Scientology policy and technology except for what he wrote himself. It was my job to know the inner workings of Scientology. The account of my personal disillusionment and departure is another story. But since I left the group in 1984, my husband and I have helped several hundred families retrieve their children, their husbands and wives, and their husbands and wives from this group. And I'm speaking to offer some insights into Scientology. When Hubbard released his first book, Dianetics, and then began this group, he created a totalitarian culture, a totalitarian system based on his claims. And the claims were that he alone was perfect, he never made mistakes, everything he said and wrote was correct, and he was the source of the only technology that could deliver mankind from its problems. And because of this, of course, never making a mistake, there was never anything to change. So he was perfect. Everyone else, as he put it, was less evolved or raw meat. And that's the word he used for everyone who wasn't a Scientologist. All ideas and methods that opposed his own were wrong or evil and had to be destroyed. It is this same culture that permeates Scientology today. In fact, we hear repeatedly from Scientology spokespersons how Scientology does no wrong and that everything it says is correct. Hubbard's policy of always attack, never defend, makes it impossible for Scientology to admit wrongdoing. It is as if he were still alive, and in fact, he is glorified as if this were so. It is this culture that still exists today, and it is this culture that has everything to do with what is happening in Scientology. It is this culture that will continue into the future because it is incapable of change and correction from within. I joined Scientology in Johannesburg in 1965. I was looking for answers. I was young, 24 years old, a registered nurse. I was naive. I soon went to England to Hubbard's headquarters. It was a friendly place at the time. No ethics conditions, no people being declared suppressive. It was just beginning at that time. I trained to the highest levels available and graduated as a Class 7 auditor, a management executive, and clear number 60, which doesn't have much meaning today, but at the time it had a lot of meaning. The information and experiences I gained, however, changed my acculturation, meaning I changed from one culture into Hubbard's culture, 180 degrees. I became a true believer. In August 1967, Hubbard created the Sea Project to evade the media and the law. He was already getting unpopular. Though outsiders knew nothing of that, I was one of 35 people invited to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands to help with his research and, as he put it, to salvage the planet. And of course I accepted, I believed. Then I met him and began experiencing the way he treated those close to him. And But it was only decades after I left the Sea Organization that I was finally able to realize the extent of his abuse. When I first got there, I quickly found that he angered easily and went into frequent, unpredictable outbursts at those around him. And I quickly rationalized his tantrums. After all, he was the only one who knew what it took to get things done. It was not all bad, I have to admit. But his emotional excesses brought out the best in us as well as the worst. In truth, he inspired me to do things, to achieve things I never think I would have done otherwise. After appointing me as captain of one of the smaller ships, the 150-foot Avon River, he left me on my own. I had never sailed a ship before. I had never even been on a yacht. So it took everything I had, the little bit of knowledge I had, to keep that ship safe. And I captained that ship and another ship, the 350-foot Royal Scotsman, through all weathers and conditions. I ran some of his organizations and completed assignments that others could not, or that others said were not completable. So he inspired us to do a lot. There were also unforgettable moments in Las Palmas, sitting on deck with him late at night, drinking wine, Spanish wine. He would drink with us. And he would talk about the constellations and what civilization was where, and what they were like, and what they wore, and how they spoke, and what they were interested in. And those were moments that we all hung on to, and we didn't want them to end, because we were so inspired. It was just so wonderful. However, on the dark side, he thrust us into his practices of cruelty, inhumanity, abuse, and punishment, all of which he systematically reframed as positive and as requirements for enlightenment. And I would ask anybody who's listening to realize that none of us were really aware of what was happening to us. We simply clung to what we saw as good, and we crazily justified what was bad. After appointing me as his first ethics officer on the ship, he gave me the assignment to correct the Australian electrician Terry Dickinson, and I spoke about this the day before. Terry had failed to get a certain radio, a high-frequency ship-to-shore radio, on the ship quickly enough, and so Hubbard wrote this order and said, well, if he doesn't do it, he has to do it, and if he doesn't do it, he will be denied sleep below decks, and he will never be able to eat with the crew or talk to the crew again. And we had just signed contracts for 1 billion years, and I was shocked to think that Terry would be in this excommunicated condition forever. So I determined to stay awake with him until that radio was on board. And to this day, I don't know if Hubbard was testing my loyalty or Terry's, or if Hubbard believed that that kind of inhumane action was required to raise my confront of evil, a subject he seemed to be obsessed with, or Terry's, or if he simply wanted to see how much brutality and manipulation someone under his control could tolerate. I didn't know. And why did I comply? It was simple. I was well indoctrinated. I was in love with the whole concept of Hubbard, who he was, that he had chosen to return at that time. That's what he said. And that we were fortunate beyond belief to be there with him. His culture had blocked all my rational thought processes and reality checks, and I was incapable of thinking logically like I am now.